An area of study that I'm going to examine during my time here is going to be hunting, conservation, and the traditions and history and how it's evolved throughout America's founding from colonial times to now. It's something I'm deeply passionate about as I'm a hunter myself. It's it's part and parcel of the American identity, um, stretching from the Pilgrims and the first Thanksgiving that we're coming up to celebrate, and it's evolved into a multi-billion-dollar industry, and I aim to set out to figure out why, and more importantly, I want to examine the honor and the rich tradition and history behind it. I took a look at two very interesting dissertations. Um, One by Doyle Leo Bueller, entitled "Capturing the Game: The Artist, Sportsman, and Early Animal Conservation in American Hunting Imagery Between 1830 and 1890." Um, Bueller argued that during the last part of the 18th century, American sportsmen and artists painted hunting related images that were designed to promote the ideals of conservation and hunting. Um, what it, and he continues on to argue that it was sort of a class issue. Upper class Americans were kind of looking down on the common hunter who either did it for sustainability or did it to make money off at market hunting. um, and it was these upper class Americans that really pushed for conservation and an acceptable use of wildlife. Doyle continues to argue that the upper class artist hunters, as he calls them, um, really led the charge for to come up with a model of sustainability and to keep it public for everybody. Um, Doyle posits that without these rich upper class hunters, um, the American model of conservation, the North American model of conservation, would have never come to fruition. Because at the time, hunting was all about market hunting, making money. At essentially everyone was their own butcher, and they could take it to town and sell their kills. And wildlife in the United States and in Canada as well was dying off in large numbers. Prime example, the buffalo. Um, um, and kind of following along that same vein, John Griffith Donlon examined, took it back a step further and saying a lot of these hunting traditions prior to Roosevelt and what Donlon calls the hunter naturalist comes from Old World Europe. Donlon believes that the Old World European and even Roman blood sport that people enjoyed kind of came overseas and became an important activity for those wealthy in Europe and then later the colonists here in the United States. And as time wore on, the blood sport turned into an ethical sport that was laden with Victorian values, that struggled with, again, industrialization and market forces. And then, as I mentioned before, Don Lawn brought up the hunter naturalist, which developed from the upper class, as Doyle pointed out in the other dissertation, and it kind of trickled down to create this rich hunting tradition here in the United States. And it turned into what biologists and hunters refer to as a North American model of wildlife conservation.